The future of Islam in Europe. Faith, identity, fear, and hope in a changing continent. The sound gradually blends into the call to prayer from a distant mosque. Footage of crowded streets, people of different backgrounds walking to work, children playing, women wearing hijab, elderly Europeans sitting in cafes, churches, mosques, and city skylines. Europe. For thousands of years, this continent has been a meeting place of civilizations. Empires rose and fell here. Religions spread across its lands. Wars reshaped its borders. Ideas born in Europe transformed the world. For centuries, Christianity was the dominant religious force throughout much of Europe. Churches stood at the center of communities. Cathedrals dominated city skylines. Religious traditions influenced culture, politics, education, and family life. But today, Europe is changing. Across many countries, church attendance continues to decline. Many young Europeans identify as secular or non-religious. At the same time, Islam has become one of Europe's fastest-growing religions. Mosques are expanding. Muslim communities are becoming increasingly visible. And every year, thousands of Europeans voluntarily convert to Islam. Yet this growth has sparked intense debate. Some see Islam's growth as a natural result of migration, religious freedom, and demographic change. Others fear that Europe's historical identity is being transformed too quickly. Meanwhile, anti-immigration parties are gaining support. Questions about national identity dominate political discussions. Concerns about integration, security, multiculturalism, and social cohesion divide public opinion. For Muslims living in Europe, these debates are not abstract. They affect daily life, the way people look at them, the opportunities available to them, their sense of belonging. So what is really happening? Why is Islam growing in Europe? Why are some Europeans embracing Islam? Why are anti-Islam and anti-immigration movements becoming stronger? And what does the future hold? This documentary explores these questions through history, demographics, politics, religion, and personal stories. Because behind every statistic is a human life, and behind every debate is a deeper story. Many people think Islam arrived in Europe recently, but history tells a different story. Its scholars advanced medicine, astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and philosophy at a time when much of Europe struggled with instability. Córdoba was a center of learning. Knowledge preserved and developed there later helped inspire Europe's Renaissance. But Islamic history in Europe did not end in Spain. Centuries later, Islam spread into southeastern Europe through the Ottoman Empire. Today, millions of Muslims have lived in the Balkans for generations. In countries such as Bosnia and Herzegovina, Albania, Kosovo, Islam is not an imported religion. It is part of local history. Understanding this history is important. Understanding this history is important because it challenges the idea that Islam and Europe are completely separate civilizations. For centuries, they have influenced one another, sometimes through cooperation, sometimes through conflict, but always through interaction. How Islam grew in modern Europe. The modern story begins after World War II. Europe was rebuilding. Cities needed reconstruction. Factories needed workers. Economic growth required labor. Governments invited workers from abroad. Many arrived from Turkey, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Pakistan. Initially, these workers were expected to stay temporarily, but many settled permanently. They built families, established businesses, bought homes. Their children became citizens. Their grandchildren grew up fully European. Then came later waves of migration, civil wars, political instability, humanitarian crises. Millions sought safety and opportunity in Europe. Today, Muslims are doctors, teachers, scientists, entrepreneurs, athletes, politicians, students, workers, neighbors. Their stories are now part of Europe's story. Perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Islam's growth in Europe is conversion. Many assume Islam grows only through immigration. But every year, thousands of Europeans choose Islam themselves. Why? The answers are deeply personal. A young woman from France grows up with no religion. She excels academically, builds a successful career, travels widely, yet she feels something missing. She describes a life filled with comfort but lacking purpose. One evening, she begins reading about different religions. Months become years. Questions become deeper. Eventually, she encounters Islam. She studies, reads, reflects, and eventually converts. For her, Islam offered structure, meaning, spiritual certainty, a connection with God. A young man from Britain struggles with addiction and depression. His life feels directionless. One day he meets Muslim friends. What surprises him is not theology. It is discipline, daily prayers, strong family bonds, a sense of responsibility. Over time, he begins studying Islam. Years later, he converts. He says, "Islam didn't solve every problem, but it gave me a purpose bigger than myself." These stories are not universal. Every convert's journey is unique. But certain themes appear repeatedly. A search for meaning, a desire for discipline, spiritual certainty, community, connection with God. In a highly secular age, these needs remain powerful. Demographics have become one of Europe's most controversial topics. Across much of Europe, birth rates have declined. Many countries face aging populations. Governments worry about shrinking workforces. Healthcare systems face growing pressure. At the same time, Muslim populations have grown. This growth comes from several factors: immigration, family formation, natural population growth, and conversion. For some observers, these trends are simply demographic realities. For others, they raise questions about cultural identity. Supporters of immigration argue that newcomers contribute economically and culturally. Critics worry about social integration and cultural cohesion. The demographic debate is often emotional because it touches on something deeper: the future. People naturally wonder what their countries will look like in 50 years. And whenever people feel uncertain about the future, anxiety grows. No honest discussion can ignore the impact of terrorism. Major attacks shocked Europe. Families lost loved ones. Entire nations mourned. These tragedies affected public perceptions profoundly. Fear is powerful, and fear often spreads faster than understanding. For many Muslims, however, these attacks created another challenge. They condemned the violence, rejected extremism, yet often found themselves associated with acts they never supported. Many describe being viewed with suspicion, feeling judged before speaking, feeling forced to constantly prove they belong. This experience contributes to what many describe as Islamophobia, a fear or prejudice directed toward Muslims. The challenge facing Europe is difficult. How can societies combat extremism while protecting innocent citizens? How can security concerns be addressed without creating division? There are no easy answers. Why anti-immigration movements are growing. As immigration increased, political reactions followed. Across Europe, movements focused on immigration gained momentum. Their supporters often express concerns about border control, housing, crime, national identity. Some feel political leaders ignored their concerns. Others believe rapid social changes occurred without sufficient public discussion. Supporters insist they are raising legitimate questions. The reality is complex. Understanding these distinctions is essential because oversimplification fuels division. Many were born here, educated here, built careers here, yet some still struggle with belonging. They may feel caught between cultures, too European for some. Yet, despite these challenges, many remain hopeful. They see a future where faith and citizenship coexist, where religious identity and national identity complement one another, where diversity becomes a strength rather than a source of conflict. The future of Islam in Europe will not be determined by statistics alone, nor by politicians, nor by headlines. It will be determined by people. Parents raising children, students building futures, neighbors learning to understand one another, communities choosing cooperation over conflict. History shows that Europe has always changed. Languages changed, borders changed, empires changed, religions changed. The question is not whether Europe will continue changing. The question is how. Will fear shape the future? Or understanding? Will division prevail? Or dialogue? Will differences become walls? Or bridges? No one knows. But one thing is certain. The story of Islam in Europe is no longer a story about outsiders. It is a story about Europe itself. And the next chapter has yet to be written. The future belongs to those who seek understanding before judgment, knowledge before fear, and truth before division.